It's an ambush.
Oh my God, it's an ambush!
It's an ambush!
Of course!
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to an ambush stream on a Friday. I know, I've done a couple of these this week. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? Might get into the habit of doing this more often. But something just dropped in the last 24 hours, and it caught my attention and brought back some old memories. Thought I'd share those with you and take a look at a humble apology. Humble apology from our favorite friend formerly at CNN, Chris Cillizza. Yes, Chris Cillizza has had a revelation, everyone. As you know, it is currently 2019. Because in 2019, you know, the year that we're in right now, Joe Biden was showing obvious signs of cognitive decline. I know, I'm taking you back here. It's kind of crazy. Remember back in 2019 when he was at the, I think it was the Iowa State Fair, he said, poor kids are just as smart as white kids? I mean, that's, oh boy, Joe, hey, hold it there, a little bit. Remember when he said he valued truth over facts? Yeah. Remember when he mixed up Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Britain, with Margaret Thatcher, who'd been the Prime Minister in the 1980s and was already dead at that point? And remember when he said that as Vice President, he met with the survivors of the Parkland, Florida shooting, even though that happened in 2018, a year after he was no longer Vice President? Remember though? Yeah, I mean, this was, I know, it was 2019. There was really nothing to be concerned about when he was campaigning to become president at all. And no one could have known. No one could have known. It's true. And there wasn't any kind of concerted effort by the media or the White House to try to, cover. No, guys, really. Anybody who would bring that kind of thing up, anybody who would say such a thing. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about the character of anybody who would say such a thing about Joe Biden. Well, you see, Republicans in particular, they tried to make Biden's mental capacity an issue. They kept trying to do that. I mean, as late as 2021, they kept trying to do it. But as our friend Chris Cillizza told us, what's the goal here? To raise doubts in voters' minds about Biden and his age in particular. It might not have worked for Trump, but Republicans haven't given up. The point. This is the sort of gross, lowest common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. If Republicans have some sort of proof that Biden is declining, they should bring it forward. If they don't, they should stop doing what they're doing. Immediately. Yes, everyone. Yes, everyone. The lowest common denominator type of politics. Questioning Biden's cognitive capabilities, especially in 2021, not to mention 2019. No, guys, that's the worst. Anybody who would do such a thing is just playing politics. Just playing politics. Oh, but that's no big deal now, right? I mean, that's all over with now. Biden's on his way out. It's, he might as well just let the whole thing lay flat, right? I mean, there's no reason to bring it up now, is there? Wall Street Journal. There's no reason to bring it up now. But before I get into that, who's joining me on this Friday afternoon? Spittlebuggies joins us over from X. Hey, Spittlebuggies, how's it going? Shady Grin, good afternoon. Kiro Soldier, good afternoon to you. Mike Savage, blarg. Vader35, good afternoon to you. Funtime Bats, hello. Jill Powers, the River Daughter, howdy. Howdy, ma'am. Green Badger Outdoors, hello. Angelverse, hello. Alice Morgan, hi. Spudgun, good afternoon. Advocatus Diaboli, good afternoon. John Trioxin, hello. Found, hello. And, Attack Alpaca, thank you so much. It's very generous of you. Never thought I'd say hooray another ambush as much as I have lately. I know, I've kind of claimed that word. Turning its entire meaning around into a good thing. Maybe, depending on your perspective. Daryl Odell, good afternoon. Kiro Soldier, thank you. Always good to see a live stream from any of y'all, i.e. AAA and you. Oh, yes. And yes, the memories of the constant gaslighting are still fresh in my mind. Well, they've apparently only become fresh-ish in the Wall Street Journal and the rest of the world in the last 24 hours or so, but I'll go over that in a moment. Secret Vampire Heiress, good afternoon. Santa Mutant 2099. Let's see, who else is here? Cynic, good afternoon. Mr. X51, good afternoon. And thank you, Mr. X. If I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. Thank you so much for your consistent retweeting and such of my tweets, or my X's, or whatever you call it. I really appreciate it. It's very nice of you. Get the word out. And speaking of which, guys, if you haven't already, please be sure to like the stream and share the show out. And if you're on X, if you can retweet it out as well, that'd be appreciated. And Rotten Corpse, good afternoon. So yesterday, love was such an easy game to play. Especially if you love Joe Biden and keeping the secret, quote-unquote, of his cognitive decline. But now the Wall Street Journal has dropped a big, deep dive into Joe Biden's decline. Now, I can't get the actual Wall Street Journal article because they have a paywall, and I'm not ponying up the cash for that. But thankfully, Mediaite has a breakdown for us. So we're going to go over this real quick. The Wall Street Journal published a lengthy deep dive into President Joe Biden's decline and how the White House has managed it. On Thursday, quote, presidents always have gatekeepers, but in Biden's case, the walls around him were higher and the controls greater, according to Democratic lawmakers, doctors, and aides who worked for Biden and other administrations, reported the Journal. Quote, there were limits over who Biden spoke with, limits on what they said to him, and limits around the sources of information he consumed. He was being managed. His brain was being managed the entire time. Oh my gosh. Concerns stretched back to the first few months of his presidency. The first few months. How about his campaign for president? Anybody with half a functioning brain knew Biden was in trouble long before he won the election. Long before. Okay, when he was still campaigning up to and through the election, he was in trouble, and people knew it. But we can't possibly question the great hope against Trump, obviously. While many members of Biden world continue to deny that Biden has declined at all, spokesman Andrew Bates commented on the story by rejecting the notion that Biden has declined. The Journal claims that staff recognized his limitations early on. Quote, a sign that the bruising presidential schedule needed to be adjusted for Biden's advanced age had arisen early on in just the first few months of his term, it reported. Administration officials noticed that the president became tired if meetings went long and would make mistakes, unquote. Right, mistakes. He's not just, his brain's not going all over the place. I'm just going to summarize this. I'll put a link to the article in the chat in case you want to read it for yourself. But I really want to get to the meat of this stream, which is our favorite friend and his apology video. Democratic leaders noticed leadership vacuum. Representative Adam Smith of Washington was the chairman of the Armed Services Committee in 2021 and repeatedly tried to speak with Biden ahead of the administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan to express concerns. The president never took his call, and the disastrous withdrawal ended up dragging Biden's approval rating underwater, where it stayed for the rest of his presidency. Okay, Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, said his interactions with the White House in the past 2 years were primarily focused on the reauthorization of a vital section of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that authorizes broad national security surveillance powers. Biden's senior advisors and other top administration officials worked with Himes on the issue, and he praised the collaboration, but Biden wasn't part of the conversation. Quote, I really had no personal contact with the president. I had more personal contact with Obama, which is sort of strange because I was a lot more junior, said Himes, who took office in 2009. Congress extended the surveillance authority for 2 years instead of the administration's goals of 5 years. And just going over the headline. Infrequent and prep for Robert Hur interview. Yes, remember the Robert Hur interview? The one that showed that Robert Hur took basically pity on a weak, declined old man rather than try to bring charges against him. Re-election campaign donors shocked by his performance in calls. Shocked, I tell you. Shocked. So the Wall Street Journal drops this story which isn't the first one to go over his various gaffes and such. But apparently, it really took the Wall Street Journal to give permission for other people who, if they did not know, they should have known and should have reported such, like our favorite friend at CNN, Chris Cillizza, who, as late as 2021, after, and I'm counting the year of campaigning beforehand too, 2019, okay, at that point, you'd had 2.5 years by August of 2021 of Joe Biden in action. And everyone and their brother who was being honest with themselves knew Biden was in trouble. But, here's the thing. I do have to extend Chris Cillizza a little bit of sympathy because he was following along with the CNN credo, as promoted by former CNN CEO Jeff Zucker. We are not investigators. We are journalists. But anyway, that's all the foreplay. Let's get into the meat of the matter, as it were. That's a bit more foreplay than I meant. Let's get into the video posted by our favorite friend at CNN, formerly at CNN, Chris Cillizza. I'll put on the psychiatrist couch here just for Chris, because I think he probably needs it at this point. This was posted over on his YouTube channel yesterday. And so now let's listen to the great Cillizza on what he has to say with some reflection. In 2024, after he left, or was fired from CNN in 2022 from being editor-at-large, and all those years he covered Joe Biden up to that point. Let's see what he has to say about his previous coverage. Oh, real quick, thank you, Frosted Glass. Other breaking news, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I know, right? Chris Cillizza has traveled back in time to 2019, where everybody already knew there were issues. But he's only now finding out because the Wall Street Journal said it was okay to say so. All right, let me turn off the background music here just a second, or turn it down a smidge, just so I don't cover up anything. All right, so let's listen to Chris Cillizza.
As a reporter,
Whoa, that's not loud enough, is it? Oh my gosh. Do I need to boost the audio on this? Oh boy. Well, I thought that was a lot louder. Can you guys hear that? I'll turn off the music entirely here. Let me know in the chat, because that sounds quiet to me. It didn't sound quiet to me when I played it earlier, but maybe it's the music. Let me know in the chat. Let me play it for another couple seconds here, and you tell me if that's too quiet.
As a reporter, I have a confession to make. I should have pushed harder earlier for more information about Joe Biden's mental and physical well-being.
Sounds okay to you? Okay, if it sounds all right. All right, let's start over again just for the sake of argument. I apologize. I was under the impression that audio was louder. I would have boosted it if I'd known or had realized. It sounds a lot different here than it did on my other media player, so that's my fault. If it's too quiet, well, not much I can do now. It would take too long to fix, so you'll just have to turn up your volume a little bit. I can't, unfortunately. This is as high as it goes on the viewer here. I don't think I can put it up any higher, unless there's some volume control I'm unaware of. Elsewise, yeah, I don't think so. So yeah, this is as good as it gets, guys. I apologize, but this is anyway.
As a reporter, I have a confession to make. I should have pushed harder earlier for more information about Joe Biden's mental and physical well-being and any signs of decline.
Yes, you should have, because you're a reporter. And, well, if you say you're a reporter and not just a, relayer of information, you should have, because the people needed to know. But you actively covered up for that. You actively dismissed any questions of his decline as gross politics. You wouldn't even consider them.
So let me explain. Joe Biden was president from 2020 to 2024. I worked at CNN through 2022. During that time, the early part when I was at CNN, 2020 to 2022, Republicans would regularly ping me and say, why don't you ask more questions to Joe Biden and how he's doing?
Yeah, I think I actually have. Let me was there like a headline you put out there that I said something like, oh yeah, that's right. Republicans keep trying to make Biden's mental capacity an issue. And it's the sort of gross lowest common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. Yeah, they did do that. You wrote a whole article about it. And?
He's 76, 77, 78-year-old man. And I would sort of brush them off because what I would say is, well, there's no obvious evidence that he's declining. Yeah, he moves a little slower, he talks a little slower, but there's no evidence that he's declining.
There's no evidence he's, again, remember, this little article was written in 2021. Biden had been campaigning and been president for, in total, about 2.5 years at that point. There's no evidence. There was no evidence that he was in decline. There was no evidence that there was something wrong, according to Chris Cillizza. Now, he's saying this now in 2024, but up to and through 2022, oh, no, it never was an issue.
And the White House and the people around Joe Biden.
Oh, pardon me. Joe Biden wasn't president 2020. Yeah, not until 20. There was the election of 20. Yeah, but he was campaigning 2019 through 2020 up through 2021. Yeah, I get confused sometimes with all the dates and stuff and everything. Yeah, so he'd already been president for 2 years. Or you'd been campaigning for president for 2 years to that point, and then was president up through August when he wrote that article. So anyway, I before the stream, I was looking up a whole bunch of stuff about what had gone on prior to Chris Cillizza's article of 2021, and I got all my years mixed up and stuff. I'm having mental decline. Now it's my turn. Everybody, you need to call somebody for me. I've lost it. Yes, P-Dog Knight. P-Dog Knight is in the chat. Yeah, and he corrects Chris Cillizza and myself, honestly. Cillizza said he was president from 2020 to 2024. That's true. That's true. He was running for president in 2020. He was running for president in 2019, but he was not president until 2021. So yeah, I get my timelines all mixed up because I was so stuck into following the election back then that it all kind of blurs together as to when things happened and effectively when the campaign started and the presidency began and all that.
Biden were absolutely adamant that suggests.
Wait. Stop it. Back.
Evidence that he's declining. And the White House and the people around Joe Biden were absolutely adamant that suggesting anything, asking the question about whether he was in some physical, mental, or both decline was offensive.
Oh, okay. So because, guys, just as a note, I haven't watched this yet. This is my first time seeing this. So because the White House told you that asking questions was offensive, you just decided that it was? Oh, okay. Well, you know, I know this is a crazy thing to have to bring up. And I did prep for this because I wasn't sure what he was going to say, but I did want to bring out some of Chris's old greatest hits. There was this time where Chris Cillizza assured everybody back in 2016, let me say for the billionth time, reporters don't root for a side, period. Well, I don't know if rooting is necessarily the right word here, but capitulating to one side versus the other, Chris? I mean, bald-facedly capitulating to what the White House told you it's offensive to ask questions. So anybody else who asked you to ask questions, what was that again? Oh yeah, it was the lowest, most gross common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. If Republicans have some sort of proof that Biden is declining, they should bring it forward. Yeah, because nobody offered up any evidence of what was allowed to slip out of the White House. But no, the White House and the people around Joe Biden, his sycophants, those who were profiting effectively in reputation, money, prestige, and otherwise by being in his inner circle, they told you that it was offensive to ask. Okay, but now, years after the fact, when it doesn't do anybody any good at all, you have to say what?
How could you? It's age shaming.
Age shaming? Age shaming. All right, Chris. Well, again, what brought you to this revelation of having to apologize?
Was offensive. How could you? It's age shaming. And I think that impacted me
You think?
at some level because while I did ask the question from time to time of, not directly the White House, but aides and people around in that orbit.
You asked the people directly depending on Biden's success what they thought of his mental acuity, you say. Yeah, remember, guys, again, I'm going to keep doing this because it's just so true. We are not investigators. We are journalists. So if the White House tells us something, well, our job is just to write it down and repeat it. Corey Suzuki, thank you so much. It's just a stutter, Scribe. Yeah, it's just a stutter. Joe Biden has always been a stutterer. When he lied about his academic record back in the 80s, he was just stuttering. When he plagiarized different people and things, it was a stutter. It was just a gaffe. That's all it was. And roundabouts 2019 through 2020 up through his first year of presidency in 2021, when Chris Cillizza wrote that article in August. It was just a stutter. All these instances were just a stutter. Theresa May is really Margaret Thatcher. He stuttered.
In that orbit, I didn't really push on it, if I'm being honest.
If you're being honest, that's always kind of been the question, Chris. I've been reading your copy often, definitely since from 2017 through about 2021. I was reading your copy nearly every night on Lords of the Night. I'm far, far too familiar with your patterns of journalism, reporting, chicanery. If you're being honest, it is something we have to ask ourselves.
Now, once I left CNN, once it became a little bit more clear to me about Biden's age, I think I did write pretty regularly and talk pretty regularly about how I wasn't sure that this guy was up to it. And then
you think? Chris, either you did or you didn't. Either you know or you don't. How can you not know? If you say after you left CNN, suddenly you're outside of the CNN bubble, and you think you talked about it? Well, then what are you apologizing for? Okay, let's extend the benefit of the doubt for just a moment. Okay, let's say that inside the CNN bubble, inside that world, Chris Cillizza was insulated from better information or was just completely in the tank. But once he got out, suddenly the veil drops and he's aware of it and he thinks he talked about it. Okay, well, again, so what's this apology for? If you think you finally realized it after the fact.
About how I wasn't sure that this guy was up to it. And then obviously after the June 27th debate, everybody, including me, was writing and talking about it.
Yes, Chris. Yes, when no one could any longer cover for the guy. Yeah, it was safe to do it then. Just like I guess it's safe to apologize now that the Wall Street Journal has put out their article. Where were you in 2019, Chris? Not 2021 when you started shaming Republicans for asking the question. 2019. 2020. 2021. 2022. Too little, too late. But okay, let's keep rationalizing, I guess.
The reason that I bring this up is in the last 48 hours, there have been two stories, one by the New York Times and one by the Wall Street Journal that document the decline of Joe Biden.
Chris, we've all been documenting the decline of Joe Biden. Just casual observers. But this is actually kind of emblematic of things. For those of you that remember Lords of the Night, I would often comment how so often we saw CNN simply republishing stories from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal and just parroting what their reporting had said because CNN couldn't be bothered to do their own, apparently. I even made a joke about it in several places. And here we are again. Well, if the New York Times says it, suddenly Chris Cillizza is allowed to say it.
And how we probably should have known then and reported then what we know now. So let me just
No. You should have reported then what everybody knew then, Chris. And this goes for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal as well. The mainstream media writ large knew there was a problem. They covered it up, Chris.
Let me just read a little bit of the Wall Street Journal piece, which is based off of 50, that's me drawing it for some unknown reason, 50 interviews with people in and around Biden.
You say 50 like that because you think your audience are idiots. You could have interviewed 50 individuals around Joe Biden. You could have looked at his public appearances and documented very easily all of his physical and mental decline in the 2019-2020 election, or the campaign thereof, and then in the 8 months through his presidency when you first wrote that article shaming the Republicans for asking questions about it. You could have done that. Or you could have had one of your underlings do it as you were the editor at large. Did you? No. Why? Oh, because the White House and the people around him told you that he was fine.
I'm just going to read a bit.
Okay.
To adapt the White House around the needs of a diminished leader, they told visitors to keep meetings focused. Interactions with senior Democratic lawmakers and some cabinet members, including powerful secretaries such as Defense's Lloyd Austin and Treasury's Janet Yellen, were infrequent or grew less frequent.
Okay, and none of that information was available to the press in background or checking logs or people's schedules or anything at all prior to this? And I'm asking that question sincerely. Did the White House completely lock down and refrain from allowing out any information on the president's schedule or meeting notes or anything else? Not classified stuff, just, the regular course of business. And if they did, why wouldn't oh, wait, that's right. I'm sorry. I keep forgetting. CNN isn't a group of investigators. They're just journalists.
Some legislative leaders had a hard time getting the presidency at key moments, including ahead of the U.S.'s disastrous pullout from Afghanistan. Senior advisors were often put into roles that some administration officials and lawmakers thought Biden should occupy, with people such as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Senior Counselor Steve Ricchetti, and National Economic Council head Lael Brainerd, and her predecessor frequently in the position of being go-betweens for the president.
And none of this information was available or couldn't have been drummed up by the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal in the years prior. Okay.
Press aides who compiled packages of news clips for Biden were told by senior staff to exclude negative stories about the president. The president wasn't talking to his own pollsters, as surveys showed him trailing in the 2024 race.
Wow, if only the American people could have known that ahead of the decision of whether or not Biden would run for a second term. Huh. Or any time during the course of his presidency. Wow, geez. I guess the White House is just really, really good at keeping secrets. Or the press is just really, really in the tank for Joe Biden these last 4 years. It couldn't be that, could it? I wonder what conclusions Chris will come to in these obvious and damning failures. I mean, it's so transparently collusion with the White House to cover up the worst of Biden's decline. How's Chris going to play this, I wonder?
I'm looking up the New York Times piece because I want to quote from the New York Times piece as well. That is pretty damning. Then there's this, the headline, New York Times, this is earlier this week, a weary Biden heads for the exits.
Okay. Yes, I have to pause occasionally for YouTube's sake. This is transformational commentary and criticism. Just so you know. Fair use, Chris Cillizza, fair use.
This is the twilight of Mr. Biden's presidency, the final days of the final chapter of an epic half-century political journey that has more than its share of twists and turns.
Boy, they just keep trying to put the bloom on that rose, don't they?
Time is catching up with Mr. Biden.
Even now, even at this late date, they are still doing their best to sugarcoat this situation. We have had a old man who has been losing his mind not running the country for the last 4 years. Chris is really burying the lead on this thing. There has been a non-functioning person in the place of president for the last 4 years, and other people have been running the country. I wonder if Chris is going to say anything about that quote-unquote revelation that only now we're aware of. Thank you, Chicago Mike. Hi, Scribe, lunch break. Hi, Scribe, lunch break. That sounds like a very specialized kind of lunch break. I believe what Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski said about Biden. You do? What did they say about Joe Biden? Specifically, I don't know. I'm sure they said some very nice things. Because why wouldn't they? And until, of course, they had to go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring of Trump in order to make nice. But thank you, Chicago Mike. Yeah, I mean, Joe Scarborough and Mika, they would never just say things because they're completely in the tank for one team. Holy cats, Fostonia! Wow, thank you, Fostonia. That's amazingly generous of you. Thank you so much. But Scarborough said, quote, this version of Biden intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Oh, Fostonia is supplementing Chicago Mike's tweet or post. Thank you so much. Analytically is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I have known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it, unquote. Wow. Chicago Mike with the shot and Fostonia with the assist. Thank you so much, Fostonia. Wow, thank you. And thank you, Chicago Mike. Is that what they said? Wow. Because, Joe Scarborough, his opinion and perspective on the world is beyond reproach, as we all know. But anyway, Chris was telling us that the country has been run by committee and stand-ins for the last 4 years. Okay.
He looks a little older and a little slower with each passing day. Aides say he remains plenty sharp in the Situation Room, calling world leaders to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon or a deal with the chaos of Syria's rebellion. But it is hard to imagine that he seriously thought he could do the world's most stressful job for another 4 years. Okay.
Everybody knew he wasn't prepared. Okay, Chris, and I don't know what he's going to say next. But Chris, you've just learned that he had not been actually doing the job for the previous 4 years. That other people were doing it for him. He was not in contact with the people he should have been in contact with. He was not taking the meetings he should have been present for, and on and on. So with this revelation, Chris, whatever your personal sorrows are for not getting it right the first time, do you have any political analysis of what this means? What it should mean in the broad strokes of things. Thank you, Keeverdam, for the huggy, hearty Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowie, wow.
Oh, there's a P-Dog Night Dogcat Fox in honor of P-Dog Night, who's in the chat. Thank you so much, Keeverdam. Appreciate that. All right, Chris, come on. Let's have a greater revelation than your own personal regrets.
Okay, I know that's a lot of text that I read, but that's what's got me thinking about the fact that I probably should have pushed harder on the.
Okay, Chris, I know. I do want to hear you grovel. But now that you've acknowledged reality, are you also going to acknowledge the breadth and the scope of this revelation for the safety, security, and condition of our government for the last 4 years?
The Biden age stuff. Because in retrospect, it's clear that the people close to him knew that at best, he had some good days and some bad days.
At best. Yes.
June 27th, the debate clearly was a bad day.
Chris, that was 4 years into his presidency and campaigning for president. No one who had been paying attention was surprised, Chris. No one who was being honest was surprised, Chris.
But if the bad day was that bad as he performed on that debate stage, the fact that he had been president without a whole lot of questions being asked about his physical and mental decline, and I'll add the fact that he continued to be president from June 27th until January 20th, 2025, I think is a little bit concerning. And
you think, Chris? You. Oh, it's a little bit concerning. Oh, geez. Wow. Chris Cillizza with the breaking news. Everybody, Joe Biden's mental acuity since he became president is a little bit concerning. The fact that he's still president is a little bit concerning. Yeah. Why hasn't the 25th Amendment been enacted at this point? And I don't care that Kamala Harris is going to be president for 30 days or something. I don't care. It means nothing. But, it should have been enacted earlier. And I did stream after stream looking at what was going on with Kamala Harris because I thought that at some point it was going to become so obvious that no one could be able to deny it and she would become the president, fulfilling her role as vice president. But no, here we are. Chicago Mike, thank you again. I have to ask, where's Harry Enton, Chris? Well, he's at CNN. Harry Enton was operating the big board at CNN during the election. He's kind of he's become the Steve Kornacki of CNN. Yeah, Chris Cillizza's personal Igor, Harry Enton, is still at CNN. He's the young blood. I don't know for how long they're going to keep him at CNN. It sounds like CNN's having a lot of internal strife lately. Again, after only 2 years of their last internal strife. I mean, but they did hire back Brian Stelter for some reason, Brian Stelter. So anyway, you were saying, Chris, that this was concerning to you? Now this was concerning to you? I mean, great.
President from June 27th until January 20th, 2025, I think is a little bit concerning and begs the question of, when did people near him know? What did they know? And why did they not share? Boy,
if only there was some kind of social apparatus, some kind of, sort of like institution that's supposed to be working in a nonpartisan way to, put the truth to power. Gosh, if only there was, a fourth estate, let's say. If only there was like a fourth estate that whose sort of like honored charge mission statement was to bring the truth to the people and hold the people in power, hold their feet to the fire about such concerns. Gosh, maybe someday there will be such an apparatus to serve the people, regardless of what the people in power might say or might shame someone in asking for. I don't know, Chris. Who do you think should have been asking those questions over and over and over again since 2021 at the latest, if not 2019 through 2020 in the first place? Who should that have been, Chris?
When did people near him know? What did they know? And why did they not share? I get protecting Biden's privacy, but he's the president of the United States.
Yes, Chris. Yes. Oh, but wait a second. Sorry. Do you get that? Because last I heard, Republicans keep trying to make Biden's mental capacity an issue. What's the goal here? To raise doubts in voters' minds about Biden, and his age in particular. It might not have worked for Trump, but Republicans haven't given up. The point: this is the sort of gross, lowest common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. We wouldn't want to drive Biden away from public life. He's only the president, and, his ability to think straight is not really that important. If Republicans have some sort of proof that Biden is declining, they should bring it forward. If they don't, they should stop doing what they're doing immediately. Well, if only Chris Cillizza and CNN had been doing what they were supposed to be doing back in 2021 when he wrote that article. What a completely different world we might be living in right now. But no, really, Chris, somebody should have really asked these questions.
Protecting Biden's privacy, but he's the president of the United States.
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
Like this isn't just your grandpa who you want to like take the keys from, but you're not to his car, but you're not totally sure how to approach it.
Yeah, where was this differential 4 years ago, Chris? That he's not just some old man, somebody's grandpa, the president of the United States, Chris.
This is the sitting president of the United States who will continue to be, after June 27th, was the president for another 6 months. And we don't know how far back signs of this physical and mental decline went.
Chris, and a Secret of Vampire Heiress, I apologize. The sound quality was far louder when I played it privately earlier, just to check it to see if it was loud enough. I didn't think to boost the audio. I thought I didn't need to, and that was my bad. I should have double checked. This is as good as I can get. I mean, I could boost it, but it would take like 10 minutes of me having to put the video through another processing thing. So I apologize. You may have to turn up your volume a little bit, and I'll try to keep my own commentary a little quieter, so I'm not blowing your ears out or anything. But Chris, 2019. I listed off some incidents from 2019. He confused Theresa May with Margaret Thatcher. He said he was vice president in 2018. Chris, there was plenty of signs. You chose to ignore them. You chose to ignore them, Chris. If only someone had said something earlier, you would have been on it, right, Chris?
And again, I don't put it just on myself or just on journalists, because I know journalists did ask, and I can tell you, I know from my experience, there was a shame factor that went into that. People around Biden worked to make you feel bad when you asked whether he was up to the job of being president, running for president again, and serving as president for another 4 years.
So you capitulated to emotional manipulation by the people that you were supposed to be holding in check as the media, as journalists. And it wasn't just you. It was everybody. They were shamed. Really, Chris? Is that your defense? Please tell me you're going to at least acknowledge that was a mistake.
How could you? And they did a very good job, at least until they couldn't hide it anymore, of hiding it.
No, Chris, are you out of your... there's a certain level of being talked down to and condescended to and gaslit that even I can't take. And that is utter and absolute horse hockey. They did not do a good job. Every time he made a public appearance, something was off. He would say something. He would lose his train of thought. He'd refer to his staff as giving him permission to speak. And on and on and on, Chris. Throughout the campaign, 2019 through 2020, and certainly from 2021 up to August of 2021, when you wrote that article dismissing any concerns, there was plenty of reason to be concerned. It was right in front of you, Chris. It was right in front of everybody else. What are you talking about?
Making it so that it was very hard to know. Yes, but he didn't do a lot of press conferences. Yes, he didn't do a lot of media interviews.
Yeah, he didn't. Didn't you find that odd, Chris? Did you ever criticize Trump for not doing press conferences or media interviews or anything by any chance?
But, when he did things, the thing I always remember is he gave the State of the Union speech earlier this year, and he was fine.
Yeah, Chris, when he has a script in front of him, he can pantomime being a working individual. He was fine. He was fine in a completely controlled and scripted environment. He was fine. Now remember, Chris Cillizza was the editor-at-large for CNN for many, many years over there. I forget exactly when he moved over there. I think it was roundabouts 2015, 2016. And so from again, I don't remember exactly when he started, but it's roundabouts then up through 2022. And so this was the mindset running CNN. Oh, well, the White House says we shouldn't ask questions. They make us feel bad. Also, when we see the president in a completely controlled environment, he looks great, relatively. So there's no questions to ask. We all knew it, Chris. And we all knew what you were doing and helping it out. You didn't? This is all just news to you? It's not real until the New York Times tells you so?
There were no obvious signs of decline. I mean, yes, he looked like a 70, an 80-year-old guy, but I wasn't like, this man cannot, under no circumstances, be president. So
I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt in most situations. In most situations, most people will try to do the right thing, and most people are not dishonest. But I got to tell you, there's only two possibilities here in Chris Cillizza saying that just now, that there was no evidence up to the State of the Union that there was any decline in Joe Biden, that there was anything to be worried about. Either he is continuing to be deceptive here, either to us or to himself, one of the two, or he really, really is that much in the tank and so cloistered in his thoughts and his perspective that nothing penetrated that would cause a question. Or maybe a little bit of both. Hard to say. But that is patently ridiculous, what he just said.
they did a good job of hiding it for a long time. But journalists, and I put myself here, you've got to, we should have been pushier.
Do I have to point to the sign again, Chris? Do I have to point to the sign again? Republicans keep trying to make Biden's mental capacity an issue. What's the goal here? To raise doubts in voters' minds about Biden, and his age in particular. It might not have worked for Trump, but Republicans haven't given up. This is the sort of gross, lowest common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. If Republicans have some sort of proof that Biden is declining, they should bring it forward. If they don't, they should stop what they're doing immediately. Oh, and also remember, let me say it for the billionth time, reporters don't root for a side, period. Right.
We should have, I don't want to speak for everyone, I should have not let the shame campaign to make you feel bad for asking the question get to me.
Chris, you were a grown adult and an experienced journalist at that time. If you were so easily emotionally manipulated or scared into not asking questions, let me ask you this, Chris. What do you have to say about your reporting style on every other story you ever worked on? Are there any other stories outside of Joe Biden that only now you realize you didn't do a good job on? Because I got to say, if you, in the position you were in, if you were willing to capitulate to the White House on any questions about a septuagenarian's mental acuity in the Oval Office, just imagine just stepping down a peg or two into the importance of other stories and things that you covered over that time. This reminds me of something. I've had the unfortunate experience, and probably many of you have as well, unfortunately, of finding out too late that someone close to you in life was lying to you. Perhaps in small ways, perhaps in large ways, perhaps catastrophically, whether it was romantic, friendship, or otherwise. This is how I unfortunately visualize those occurrences. I think of my entire history with an individual like a photo album. And then at the moment I find out that they've been lying to me or hiding things from me, and not like little white lies and things, but like the important stuff, the meaningful stuff. It's as if you take that photo album, put it up on its spine, and you pour grease in between all the pages. And then you open up that photo album again. And those memories are still there. Memories of the times you spent with that person. But now they're all tainted. Now they all have this sick, yellowish, icky film over them of suspicion, of doubt, as to whether or not anything you remember about your relationship didn't have some element of deception. And you'll never know for sure what was or was not fully real or how you remembered things, because now they've caused you to have to question everything. So I wonder, in the late night hours when Chris Cillizza starts thinking about this, if he's being honest with himself, did any of this kind of mentality find its way into any of his other reporting? And if anyone were to question him on it now, would he have any real defense? Chicago Mike, thank you again. I heard a comment called Biden, I think it was Jimmy Dore, Roomba. After he's done talking, he didn't remember where to go. That's, yeah. But we can't say those kind of things because that would be shameful. That would be shameful. We don't want to, feel ashamed for asking questions or bringing up problems with the President of the United States. No. And there was no evidence. And thank you again, Faustonia. Holy cow, thank you, Faustonia, so much. This blithering cockwomble has zero credibility going forward. He can never be trusted with saying anything anymore as a journalist. If he said that ice is cold, I'd want a second opinion. And again, that's what I'm really, really curious to know, if in his heart of hearts. Now, there are plenty of redemption arcs out there that are far more dramatic than what Chris Cillizza might have here if he were to have a come to Jesus moment with himself and his readers, especially on something as important as this in his previous professional life. I hope he does. I still have hope for Chris Cillizza, but I guess the proof will be in the proverbial pudding. Okay, there's only 3 minutes left of this. Again, I apologize for the quietness of the audio. I'd boost it if I could. I'll try to keep quiet.
Because it's now clear from both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times piece that there was real deterioration even before, and by the way, all the reporting that we've seen since the June 27th debate, it's not just these two stories, that there was real and significant decline in Joe Biden, and that it was being managed by the people around him. They were insulating him. They were keeping sort of the political world out and keeping him sort of bunkered in.
Every time that he says something that was patently obvious to anybody paying half a mind's of attention to Joe Biden in the 2020 campaign up through June of this year, I simply cannot take him seriously as a thinking adult. I mean, I kind of looked at reading his stories over the course of Lords of the Night and poking fun at his, his spelling errors or his punctuation errors while he's editor-at-large, and criticizing some of his copy or conclusions or hand-waving of things. I kind of looked at it as, kind of a friendly game kind of thing. In my own head, obviously. Chris Cillizza has no idea who I am, but that's not the point. But it just became so, he became kind of like the mascot of Lords of the Night, because we read his stuff so often. But this is just stupid. This is just ridiculous. I mean, this guy has been a journalist. This guy has been inside the media, what do you want to call it? Contraption of Washington, D.C. inside politics and such for years and years and years and years. I cannot believe that he's being serious right now. And if I do believe he's being serious right now, I can't take him seriously as a thinking adult.
And that should have been something we knew more about. Now,
Yeah, and whose job was it to find that information and deliver it to the public, Chris? We should have. You're right. And if you were just a schmuck like me, if you were just another Joe Schmo who doesn't pay that much attention to the media and politics and stuff, that statement would be completely fair. However, you're not Joe Schmo. You weren't Joe Schmo. You were a senior editor at large for CNN, one of the biggest news conglomerates on the planet. You're right. We should have known. And it was your job to tell us.
Something we knew more about. Now, you can argue, well, what does it matter? Biden eventually got out of the race, and it's not like it's Sure.
But, there was just nobody at the wheel for all that time previous, and he's still in the Oval Office today.
But he's been the president for the last 4 years. So
yeah.
It's critically important. And we've learned, by the way, questions about presidential health, mental and physical health, whether it's Ronald Reagan or Kennedy or FDR. We've seen a lot of it. Trump.
Yeah, gosh, if only, it had never been the case previously that on reflection, there were any questions, concerns, or anything about a president's physical or mental health. There was no precedent for this. There was no precedent for this. And of course, you didn't do any questioning of Trump's physical or mental health during his term. Right? I mean, you wouldn't lean on Trump's age or mental acuity or attitude or cognition or anything. No, I'm sure you didn't do anything like that.
We've seen a lot of this where there is a lack of transparency. So we need to learn our lesson.
We all did, Chris. We all did. You guys decided to look the other way. We need to learn our lesson. Chris, this is why no one trusts the media anymore. Things like this. You're supposed to be the career professionals. You're supposed to be the media writ large, and you in particular, for the time that you had the job, this was what you were supposed to do. You were supposed to ask the questions that the people in power were hesitant to answer. You were supposed to get answers. And if you didn't get answers, you were supposed to tell us that the people in power were not willing to give answers. That's what you were supposed to do. Now, as the Green Arrow might say, paraphrasing slightly, you have failed this country.
I think. Donald Trump's going to come into office in his late 70s. We know very little about his medical history. I think.
But okay, now it's okay. Okay, well, no, now it's okay to start asking. Yeah. Okay, well, glad you learned your lesson, Chris. So, as I can only assume then that your folly over the years that you were at CNN and the New York Times and Wall Street Journal's revelation and permission that they've given you to now ask these questions. Now, for the next 4 years of Trump's presidency, now you on your Substack will be very keenly focused on these things because you've learned your lesson. You gave a pass to the correct president. But now you'll be more on point for the bad president. And here's the thing. He should be. If Trump starts losing his mind, I want the same scrutiny put on him that you should have put on Biden. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If only you'd been honest with everybody and yourself years prior.
We as journalists need to keep asking questions. Have you seen any signs of his mental or physical decline? Now, his aides may just say, no, he's great, 100%. But keep digging. If there are those signs, there will be the people who are worried about it. And
this is infuriating to listen to. This is honestly infuriating to listen to. It's not surprising, but it doesn't make it any less anger-inducing.
Should have gotten to those people with Biden more and more frequently to accurately represent what was happening in the White House and then let the public make up their own mind. But I think
Oh, but, heaven forfend you do that. But as we know, Republicans keep trying to make Biden's mental capacity an issue. What's the goal here? To raise doubts in voters' minds about Biden and his age in particular. It might not have worked for Trump, but Republicans haven't given up. The point. This is the sort of gross, lowest common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. If Republicans have some sort of proof that Biden is declining, they should bring it forward. If they don't, they should stop doing what they're doing immediately. Chris, how dare you question Trump's mental or physical health? Chris, that is the lowest form, gross, lowest common denominator politics ever, Chris. Oh, but of course, you couldn't have known that back in 2021. You couldn't have had that perspective back in 2021 because Republicans were asking you about it.
At least for the first couple of years of his presidency, maybe the first 3 years, the image of him as a older but hale and hearty older man prevailed. And I'm not sure, based on these two stories, the Journal story and the Time story, I'll link to both below, but also just all the reporting we've seen since June 27th, since the debate.
Chris, there was reporting long before June 27th. Okay, just look up Biden gaffes 2019. There were stories from Business Insider and tons of other places listing off some awfully big quote-unquote mistakes and gaffes that Biden was having as far back as 2019 when the campaign started. The time did not begin on June 27th.
I'm not sure that was an accurate, in fact, I don't think at all that was an accurate depiction of his physical and mental state.
You don't say.
Even if he had good days and bad days, well, he had bad days.
You don't say.
And those bad days were pretty bad. And when you're the president of the United States, you don't get to have good days and bad days.
Oh. Yeah, anger. Just flat out anger.
You got to have a consistently good, in terms of your mental, cognitive abilities, your physical abilities, you got to have good days. And so I think it's a lesson that we have to learn going.
I just be repeating myself at this point. I still have to pause, but I just broken record territory.
Forward, because again, Donald Trump will be the oldest person ever to hold office if he serves for 4 years. And I will be mindful of that because, again, asking those questions isn't a partisan thing. Asking those questions is a journalism thing.
What?
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Right?
Okay. We're almost done. Almost done.
And I should have pushed harder and not been as willing to accept the, now he's fine. Look at him when he's in public campaign. And I did. Anyway, I'm always want to be as authentic, honest, and transparent with you as possible. This is part of that effort. 4 things. Subscribe to this channel.
No. Well, I already am because I'm morbidly curious, but I wouldn't recommend it. So there you go. That's Chris Cillizza's mea culpa, if you can call it that. Because apparently it was just, my bad. On behalf of the media writ large, as well as himself, it's just like, our bad, guys. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot else to add. I think I've said everything I need to say or want to say about it, but I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. If you have any comments you'd like to put out there real quick, put them in the chat now. I'll scroll up a little bit and see if I can catch anything. And if I missed a comment you'd like to have read, just post it real quick and I'll try to get it on here. BG Scribely, I think this is all trying to open up a bullshit attack on Trump's health later on, where it was verboten question of president's health for the last few years. This is how this appears to be how Chris Cillizza is trying to rationalize his mistake into a newfound sense of purpose. But here's the thing. all that's going to happen is that Chris Cillizza and every other reporter is going to do exactly what they should have been doing under Biden. We should demand to know, especially when circumstances like age or evidence elsewise would indicate that there's something wrong with the commander-in-chief, if there's something wrong with the commander-in-chief. And if the folly of not asking about Biden's health means that the White House and so on and so forth going forward, and the media writ large, are going to be on point with that, I don't have a problem. I honestly don't. Asking questions about the health of the chief executive is legitimate. Now, there's plenty of illegitimate things that I'm sure that the media is going to bring up about Trump going forward, as we saw throughout the entirety of his presidency and even afterwards. And we chronicled many of those on Lords of the Night. My favorite one, by the way, with taking Trump completely out of context and trying to turn into something sinister. My favorite one was when he was at a cabinet meeting and the cameras were there and he was talking about Space Force. And you can still look this up. This story is still out there on CNN and their archives or whatever. He was talking about Space Force. He was describing Space Force. And he said it would be a separate but equal branch of the military. And the write-up within hours of that was, Donald Trump uses segregationist language to describe new military branch. As you know, separate but equal was a phrase used in the 1950s and 60s. Blah-da-da-da-da. Yeah, that was my favorite. That's when I knew the media had nothing. But they were grasping at straws for anything they could try to spike him on. But if they want to focus on and keep tabs on his health and mental cognition, just as I wouldn't have complained about that under Biden, I won't complain about it under Trump. That's fair. Now, it all depends on to what extremes they go to and how they try to characterize things, but we'll see. We'll see. They're going to feel far more free to talk about it now than they did before, which again, too little too late for the sake of this current administration. Shiro Amada, just because you can no longer hide it after the debate doesn't mean the cognitive decline started that day. No kidding. And Chris is, again, either he is completely as dense as lead, or he's being ridiculously deceptive to himself and us, the public, if he's trying to indicate that, oh, there really wasn't anything to say before that debate. I mean, he looked great out in public, da-da-da. And then, of course, he comes back afterwards and says, well, that really wasn't the best way to look at it. Let's see. Anybody else? As I scrolling. Dexter's Killer Lab. Crickets was the appropriate response to it's a journalism thing. Yeah. It's a journalism thing. Yeah. But remember, again, Chris Cillizza, he wasn't a journalist. Oh, sorry, he was a journalist. He wasn't an investigator. Pardon me. There's a distinction that Jeff Zucker made sure everybody knew at the time. They're journalists, not investigators. They report things. They don't ask questions. They don't look for hidden truths or anything. BG, yeah, if there is a real problem, it should be questioned. I'm just thinking it's going to be just a baseless mudslinging. It could be. But, given the last 4 years, a little overcompensation, it's to be expected. And, it'll even out eventually, but it's also a healthy thing to have done. Quippers United, here's the thing. Who gets to decide the mental health of the president? We already know there are illegitimate doctors who will testify that Trump is insane. Will they get to administer testing? Yeah, there's a lot of questions as to, how much of the president's condition should be private, right? Of all the people in the country. And this is a legitimate question of privacy, right? I mean, if there is a obvious problem with the president and the 25th Amendment is there as a mechanism, as a fail-safe for such problems, but the only people who are allowed to report on such problems may do this same thing as they did for Biden in the future, whether it's Trump or a future president, what kind of constitutional questions does that bring up? Should there be some other kind of, process for things like that? I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have the answers, but it does bring up some legitimate questions because if both the vice president, the cabinet, his aides, and everybody else was willing to keep mum on this, a situation that looked at objectively might legitimately trigger the 25th Amendment replacing the president, but they stalled it off because they were telling lies. What should we do about that as a country? Should there be any legislation about that? It's a good question. Jill Powers River, Biden's White House doctor should lose his license for concealing the truth about Biden's, I'm assuming, mental health. Well, again, this comes down to doctor-patient confidentiality and the laws that we have in place to protect somebody's personal privacy. Those obviously do extend to the president. But as I said, should there be some kind of extra gear in the works when it comes to the executive's health and public disclosure? I don't know, like these are questions that hopefully will be brought up because, it's one of those things where we don't know we need to discuss a possible change to the rules until something comes along that seems like it should be breaking a rule that doesn't exist. So, yeah, everybody who covered up Biden's mental condition, and this is the part that I guess shouldn't baffle me, given Chris Cillizza's confessions today, it shouldn't baffle me, but it does. The implications of this conspiracy of silence at the top of our government for 4 years and the country not actually being governed over or administered by the elected president. That Joe Biden was effectively incapacitated for 4 years to fulfill his duties as president. Chris isn't talking about that. Chris isn't bringing that up except in the most sort of loosey-goosey broad terms. There's a bigger story here, a story that shouldn't just end when Biden leaves office. I wonder if anyone is seriously going to look into that. Shiogorath, Trump, Space Force and Air Force will be separate but equal by Betsy Klein, CNN, June 18th, 2018, updated January 6th, 2023. Was it really 2018? Because I read it when it first came out. Was it really that long ago? Man, that whole thing is burned into my memory. Burned into my memory. It was the most ridiculous, cherry-picked, outrage machine nonsense. Let's see. Assassin of the Great. Since they stole a certain political event, they could not let the American people know Child Sniffin' Joe also had dementia. They could never have kept their ill-gotten power. This needs to be investigated. This really does. Here's the thing. And I said this, this is long before I was on YouTube, but I said this after Obama was elected and he decided not to do any rigorous investigations into the lead up to the Iraq War and how it was conducted therein. If you do not have consequences come down on something like this, especially when it goes into abuses of executive power or secrets kept from the American people that should not have been, when it comes to, in this case, the health and cognition of the chief executive, if you do not have consequences befall the people involved in these things, it is going to happen again. There has to, this is moral hazard. A precedent has to be set. There has to be something that happens that is going to dissuade anybody from trying to take that risk again with the safety and security of the country. So I really do hope that somebody does something meaningful in looking into this after the fact. I really hope the Trump administration and the Republicans, the House, the Senate, they do a full-on investigation into this and consequences befall anybody who either violated the law or the trust of the American people in covering up for Joe Biden. That's all I'll say on that. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. If you have any other thoughts on this, please leave them in the comments below. Also, leave a like on the way out if you would. By the way, I have a weekly show on here called TED Excellence. Next Wednesday for Christmas will be my yearly TED Xmas event, where I'll do a little marathon of TEDx talks just for fun to spend some time with all you on Christmas, if you happen to have Christmas to yourself, as I do, or if you're just done with Christmas stuff and want to have something to distract you. Also, I'll be here Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for the Sunday stream, where I'll go over some other news of the week And we'll leave this one alone for now and let it stand on its own. But otherwise, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very little to do. Everybody who donated, holy cow, thank you guys so much for your generosity, especially at this time of year. And if I didn't mention it, and I don't think I did, at the top of the chat box, I've got a link up there to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. If you guys would take a look at that. If you can donate, please do so. But even if you can't, if you can share that out on social media, I would appreciate it. Everyone, have a good rest of your Friday and weekend. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.